Hey, so we just want to welcome everyone who is hanging out in the chat with us. Thanks for coming to this live chat with Callie and I. And we have with us our guests, Nick Cutter, Craig Davidson, and Ian Rogers. And we're just going to kind of go around and introduce ourselves. I am Sadie Hartman, Mother Horror. I am the co-owner of the Nightworm subscription company, Nightworms. I also review horror for Scream Magazine and also Cemetery Dance and various other platforms. You can follow me on social media at Mother Horror on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and wherever else you want to talk about books. We were talking about how fictional characters ruin our lives today on Twitter. So, if you want to involve yourself in that discussion and talk about how, you can't function after reading a hard book. And then over here is Callie, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm Callie Weisgarber. I'm on social media as Page and Parlor Books. I review on Goodreads and Amazon, nothing super professionally, but I am on the Nightworms blog quite a bit, and I have a feature on there on Friday Feels. So every Friday I'm on the Nightworms blog because I'm a photographer, and I take a lot of fun book pictures. And I'm also just a super book nerd, and I like to read all of the terrible, gory horror that I can get my hands on.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. Okay, and then we also have with us today Ian Rogers.
Hi, I'm Ian Rogers. I'm the author of the short story collection Every House is Haunted, as well as the Blacklands collection Super Noir Troll Tales. I've also published a couple of novelettes with Tor.com, Go Fish, and just a couple months ago, Shards.
Yeah, we like Shards. And also with us today is Craig Davidson, aka Nick Cutter.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much for having me, Sadie. So my name's Craig, aka Nick. Written The Troop and The Deep and Little Heaven and The Breach, and under my own name, Rust and Bone and Cataract City and The Fighter and some other books. So it's lovely to be here. It's as usual, it's kind of awkward this way, but well, it's not awkward anymore. A year into it, this is kind of our lives. So it's nice to be able to see you guys, as distant though it may be.
Yeah, I know. I really appreciate you guys showing up for this too. It's good to see people's faces and put a voice and a face to the name and the work. I do want to give a shout out to some people hanging out in the chat because they're all of our friends, basically. We have Mindy who wants to say hey. Also, fellow Worms here, and she wants to say hey. And this person wants to tell Nick Cutter that the troop gave amazing nightmares, which is, it's funny because my first encounter was with the Deep. And it seems like everybody else, their first encounter was the troop. Callie, was your first encounter with Nick Cutter, the troop?
Mine was the troop. I've read every Nick Cutter book so far, and mine was the troop, and then Little Heaven, and then the Deep, then the Acolyte, and then the Breach.
Yeah. And so like the Acolyte and also Every House is Haunted is cheesy, right? Or that's a Canadian publisher. Mm-hmm. That is no more, right?
That is no more. No.
Right. So can fans still go back? Let's show it. Do you have yours handy?
I have it, yeah. Right here.
So is that particular book, and also Every House is Haunted, which I have that one too because I have a signed copy of this one.
Fancy.
But are those available to fans at all?
Ian, would you know?
Every House is Haunted will be available. I have the rights back to it. There's some movie stuff that I'm very close to being able to talk about. We can't quite talk about it yet, and the reprint is wrapped up in that. So I'm hoping to sort of announce one and then the other. So it will be in print again, and there'll be an audio version too. Hopefully one day soon.
Oh, that's good. Good to know. And also, Craig is the
probably the same. They were once the bankruptcy happened. I think they were pretty good about giving people's rights back. So yeah, the Acolyte did come back to me. I don't have any plans to republish it at this point. But yeah, I feel like on the secondary, or this is Thor. I feel like on the secondary, or is it Barnabas?
Sorry, Barnabas.
I feel like, yeah, you can probably buy it on the secondary market, but again, there's no for Ian, obviously. What's the story again? I just reread it. It's awesome. Oh, the House on Ashley Avenue.
Yeah,
has there's lots of good stories in that collection, but I think that's the one that has intrigued filmmakers the most over the last, I don't know, 5 years probably or longer. So
yeah, they definitely gravitate towards. I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a great story. But
it is a great story.
It's just funny. Yeah, I think they just see a lot of cinematic potential with it. Yeah, I don't want to cat too much out of the bag. But yeah, I guess I can say that that's definitely part of where the interest is, or where the news is sort of centered, without giving too much of it away. Yeah, it's exciting. It's always nice to have people interested in your work, and when Hollywood is interested too, it's not a validation. I'm proud of that story, and I'm proud of it just to refer to have been published. But when you see people who can see it, the potential for it in another medium, it makes it even more exciting. It means your work can get out to an even wider audience. In my way, I'm not particularly interested in moving to LA and writing movies, but anything that brings positive attention to your work. That's how I feel about like awards too. Like awards in the sense that like this book is better than that book doesn't really mean as much to me, but anything that brings positive attention to a book I think is great. So I think if I get nominated for an award, or if I win an award, that's awesome. But if I don't really feel like, oh, I wish I was. It's just it's sort of subjective, and I just try and focus on the positive. Keep the focus on your work, and keep the focus on just being sort of the idea that achievement of its own reward, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Horribly.
No, I mean, just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, like Kallie and I read The Shards together, or is it just Shards?
Just Shards.
Yeah. So that's available for free on Tor.com. If anybody wants to go over there and read it, I highly recommend it. I know Kallie does too. We were fangirling together, but that's very cinematic. I mean, I might have sent it to some people, but for me personally, like when an adaptation comes to screen off of a book that you read, especially a short book that you read, I think it translates really well to the screen in like an 84-minute movie or something. Like I think horror translates probably is one of the best translations to.
Well, it's really hard to do something really different with the popular tropes, and Shards, it was actually originally titled, had a really long title, like Certain Events at a Cabin in the Woods, which I felt was a little too on the nose, because it's basically sort of a twist on the Cabin in the Woods type story, and I just really wanted to do something different with it without being too gimmicky with it. I didn't want it to be gimmicky. I just wanted to sort of say, what if most of the people that went to the cabin, except for one person, actually survived, and the really horrible stuff happened after they got home, So that was really the idea that I wanted to sort of explore and went with it from there. But yeah, it's definitely an idea that my film agent is obviously shopping around, because again, she sees the sort of the cinematic possibilities of it too. So yeah, it's nice. There's been a really great, lots of feedback for the story. Tor.com is a great venue for it because it's free. If you want to read it online, and if you want to read it on your e-reader, it's only $1 for these little stories. Incredible artwork by Greg Ruth. I was really, really impressed with it. Yeah, it was just overall a great experience. And I got to work with Ellen Datlow again, like the legendary editor who's just, I've been publishing for 15 years, and she takes you back to school. It's just, I've learned so much. And I'm just in the meat and potatoes of your writing. It's just, you don't need this. You can make this better. It's just really, really straightforward. And it's like surgery. It's just, she's not even thinking about it. She just really wants to make your work better, and she can. Yeah, it's
yeah, she's amazing.
Her again.
Yeah. And Craig, with The Breach, you did like an exclusive kind of release with Amazon. And I think I heard buzz that was going to be a miniseries or a show, but can you talk on that?
Well, yeah, that was like the long story on that, which I won't make too long, but it started out as like a movie script, which I got some notes on, and we got some funding up here in Canada for it, but really rewrote the script. And I thought maybe the best thing to do is like actually write a book based on sort of what, the plot, basically, right? So I wrote this book, and then I approached my friend, another Ian, actually, Ian Weir, who's like a long-term screenwriter up here in Canada. And he was like, read the book and read the prior screenplay and said, yeah, like, let's write this together. So it took a long time. I was very shocked. Obviously, I have a novel background, and I wouldn't even say I have dalliances with. I wrote a pilot once for one of my Davidson books. Other than that, like, people just option the work and they go off and they do their own thing with it. And for the most part, I'm super pleased if it's just in hands who are considerate and people who are like paying attention. And if they want to make changes, that's perfectly all right. I'm sure Ian would mostly be the same. You're at some level, like when you give your work to an entity, anybody in Hollywood, you sort of, unless you're sort of a J.K. Rowling or something, you really probably don't have much of your fingerprints on it. And even if you asked to, I remember I sold a story once years ago, and say they optioned it for like $4,000. I said, I would like to be involved in the writing of this, and they actually offered me more money to not have anything to do with it.
Oh, wow. That's not at all how I assumed it worked.
I wasn't even trying to like ask for more money, but that's what they're like, we'll actually pay you, not a lot more, but we'll pay you slightly more in order that you have nothing to do with it. Because what they want to do, and smartly so, is like give it free and unencumbered to a screenwriter or a producer or somebody who, they don't really necessarily want the fingerprints of the author on it. But in any case, yeah. So we wrote this script. It went through several passes at different film granting bodies, and then they got a grant for it, and then they filmed it. They filmed it last summer or last fall, I guess. So so it's made. I mean, it actually was made by a Rodrigo Godino, who is from the guy who runs Remorque, basically. So he actually does directing as well. So I haven't seen it. I have no idea, but I'm obviously hopeful, and I think the people who are involved in this is our daughter coming in here.
Special guest appearance by.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure Kallie would say the same thing, but for The Breach and for people who are Troop fans, I mean, so like I'll just showcase this, but I mean, people who are Troop fans, if you liked The Troop, you definitely need to check out The Breach, because I mean, that's what Nick Cutter. That's that brand of like disgusting body horror and bugs. I mean, I was on a walk listening to that, and I was like, just kind of like, there's some gross like bug stuff.
Me and Ian would say the same, and any writer you have on this show, we're very obsessive, driven by certain kind of, I don't know, goes back to childhood, goes back to, it's very strange sometimes when you like try and break down why you wrote a given book or a given story. But I mean, did you find that, Ian, too? It all kind of like I don't know what to say, like sort of your hobby horses come out over and over again, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I was saying earlier about, I try to write things in a way that entertains me, because I figure if it's entertaining me, I've got a good shot of entertaining readers. And when it comes to writing horror, I think, well, if I'm trying to write something that's scary or disturbing or gross or whatever it is I'm trying to achieve, your best place to start is personal experience. What scares me, what disturbs me. And yeah, it's the same very similar thing. Oh, there she is.
So cute.
I can't help that. You bring a baby into it. It's just,
I know. Sorry, Ian. You were just upstaged by a baby.
The cat was nothing. Frank was one up me again with the baby. He's like, yeah, just cry, Artemis.
Bring a baby out. Sorry. No,
it's all good. So yeah, for me, it would be stuff like spiders. Like, I'm just other bugs don't bother me, but spiders really bother me. So I mean, even in the Blackland series that I do, this sort of this supernatural noir series with this dimension that lies next door to ours, that's just filled with every supernatural creature you could think of. There's it just looks like a landscape of woodland at night, because there's no sun over there, which is why it's called the Blacklands. And some of the entities that are over there are these trees, these like carnivorous trees called blackwoods.
Are these? Is it these?
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. Those are the.
Are these available?
They're not available right now. Those ones are out of print. So these are.
Sorry.
One day it'll be back out. But yeah, these blackwood trees are. They're basically, they're almost like spiders. They incapacitate people, and their roots kind of like crawl on them, and they sort of feed off them that way. And in my mind, it was very much of a spider, the way that it would sort of ensnare people in a web instead of this way. It's roots, but it all goes back to my sort of arachnophobia. But in the same way, and I'm sure Craig will say this too, I'm also compelled. Like I don't shy away from this stuff. I remember when the movie Arachnophobia came out, I think I still saw it 2 or 3 times in the theaters, even though I'm terrified of spiders. Like, why am I doing this? But I'm compelled, I just, and it's not therapy. I'm not there to make myself strong. I'm still a coward when it comes to spiders, but I don't know. I think when you are interested in the subject matter, even if you're not writing it or creating it, you, maybe it's just your roller coaster ride. It's terrifying, but you're still compelled to do it. There's a part of me that doesn't really know why. It's almost instinctual. I just keep doing it over and over again.
That makes sense. Kallie, are you afraid of spiders?
No, I am afraid of falling backwards, which is like a weird thing. But like when I was a kid, my brother used to tip my chair back.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
My brother and I are Irish twins, so we were both born in the same calendar year, and we were very close and super disliked each other. So he used to do that, and to this day, falling backwards is like my number one. I cannot. If there's a roller coaster that goes backwards, I won't do it. I can't. No. But bugs don't really freak me out. Spiders, nothing like that. Really, it's really like the human monsters that scare me the most, I think.
So you're saying we have a spider in our house, and we can't do anything about my wife and I. We can call you up. So
yeah, I'll be there.
All right.
As long as I don't have to go backwards to get it, we're good. No, I was telling my husband, who is not a reader, about each of your works, and kind of comparing and contrasting the two, because I think it's so interesting for people to know, like, Ian, like your work, you can put so much in such a small amount of pages. Like Shards being 35 pages blew my mind. Like the amount that you can do in such a short space of time is amazing. Where in contrast with things like certain scenes in The Troop or certain scenes in Rust and Bone or Cataract City are almost like slow motion. Like I've never read anyone describe a punch so many different ways over so much time. And it's so interesting to me, like the way that you guys can play with time in your writing.
Well, one of the things I'll say, I was a fan of Craig's work before I met him. And it was one of these things where when I did finally get the chance to meet him, I was like, how do I introduce to this person where I want to, befriend him without going off on a total fanboy moment. So, that got blown out of the water because I still had a total fanboy moment because he's an incredible writer and he's Canadian and he's writing about stories in Canada. He's sort of showing that it can be done, doing this kind of genre work. But Craig does it in a way, as you said, like I remember one of the stories, I can't remember exactly which, it's in Rust and Bone, I believe, where he's talking about the number of bones in like the hand or something. And he's very intelligent, but he's using it in a very literary way because what's coming is he's trying to explain to you that the reason why there's a number of these bones in his hands, he's about to punch this guy in the face in the next scene. So and to me, that's Craig's work to a T.
Wait, wasn't Craig a boxer too?
Oh yeah.
Well, I wasn't a boxer. I was a punching bag. A couple times. I don't have that particular gear in me. I mean, I certainly got in fights when I was a kid, but I was often on the losing end, and it was often to like stop the antagonism that I was facing. Like in a lot of ways, the only way that I'd ever discovered, and sometimes I noticed that with my own son to a small degree, it's like the only way you can, me and my wife have discussions about this. Like, how do you stop if you have a child who is, going through bullying? The sort of stereotypically male thing is like, well, make them think about it. And that was sort of the way I grew up, was to, if you take a beating, but the bullying stops, then it's worth it. You sort of convince the bully that there's at least some threat that he's going to get hurt in all this. So, and it had been effective for me. So yeah, long and short of it is I had a lot of experience with fighting growing up, but not successfully. And it continued in my boxing foray, where I wasn't very successful either. And it was also like, God, I remember doing that. But it was, I really like the dedication to it. And I really feel like that in a lot of ways is the same with writing. Me and Ian have talked all sorts of stuff and writing as well. But like, there are certain writers who are Stephen King, to use an example, Clive Barker, just if you want to use the horror field, who are just so goddamn talented that it really, doesn't, even if they weren't driven, which they were and are, they would have been a success. And there's some writers who probably have so much talent that they can push that into a career just on the basis of pure talent alone. Mm-hmm. But I think, I learned a long time ago that I have to take whatever talent I have and harness it to like a work ethic that, I have to be working harder, or at least that's for the longest time, that's the way I kind of approach things. And of course you risk burnout with that. I'm just kind of continuing to push towards something. But yeah, I mean, I guess to use the fighting aspect, I really enjoyed the actual training of fighting, even though I knew at the end I was going to get smoked, which I did. But, the actual training for it and the physical dedication and the mental dedication and all that sort of thing was actually really beneficial, I think, to my maturation in a strange way as a writer, learning that like the majority of it for me is the dedication and the hard work to it. And that's sort of what carries the day, or what has to this point.
I have to also apologize, Craig, because I didn't know you were going to go down so easy that one match. I didn't know you were actually going to fall for that. Your shoelaces are untied. You actually fell for that. And
wow, you left yourself open to that one.
Yeah, I suppose I did. Yeah.
That's awesome.
No, but just to add on to what Craig was saying in terms of talent, I remember something my father said, and I think it was actually it really resonated with something what Stephen King said as well. Like talent, he felt was cheap. There's lots of talent out there, but you have to do something with it. The discipline, the hard work is something that a lot of people either don't have or just won't do. So talent will not carry the day. Like you really have to. There's a discipline there that's involved. It's some people are born and they're in really, really great shape, and it makes something that you're easy from. Other people have to work for it. But even if you are already in really good shape, that there is a discipline. Nothing's free. It's just, if you're going to succeed, I've never heard of anyone that said they didn't get there, but through some level of hard work. You're not winning the lottery with these things. It's just, when I look at someone's success, like Craig's, for example, I don't think Craig would ever say that it was just, it was a lightning flash out of sight. Craig is very modest, but I also know how hard he works. It's just, he's written a lot of books, and there's a lot of books that he's written, I'm sure, that have never even been published, because we all do. I've written lots of books that either didn't sell, or I didn't even try to sell them because I knew they were terrible, but they get you to where you are, because it's the one thing that's in common across all disciplines, whether it's creative arts or anything in life, is classic hard work. And it sounds like such a cliche to say that, but it's really true. Sometimes the cliches are cliches because they're right.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is true. I mean, anything you want to do, you have to, have some sort of level of discipline. I mean, reviews and reading and stuff doesn't do itself. Like for a long time, I had a part-time job and managed to read, 200 books in a year and wake up at 5 a.m. and write reviews before I left for work. I mean, it's kind of bringing up like two really controversial topics that people are talking about a lot right now, which is like rest and hustle. There's a level of people who are advocating for people to rest more, and then there's people who are advocating for the hustle. And then also, in tandem, like the whole debate about, are you a full-time writer, or do you have a day job / writing gig? And then what does that kind of afford you in terms of your successes? And so I'm just kind of curious, like, since we're talking about that subject, like, Ian and Craig, do you consider yourselves full-time writers, or are you taking an income in other ways?
Craig, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm a full-time writer. But to be honest, I mean, that you bring up a really interesting, I don't know the rest versus hustle furor, if there is one, but like, I get the notion of like, it's like I worked at a magazine before our children were born, and before Rust and Bone came out, The Fighter came out, some of the early Craig Davidson stuff, and then that didn't work out really well. And then I did do jobs, librarian and bus driver, and worked at a magazine, worked at a newspaper, and then I don't know, probably about 10 years ago. Yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah, one of which, a book sort of came out of the experience, and I was working at a magazine, and I don't know how Ian feels about this or other writers you talk to. It's like, why I was doing it back then is because a lot of my best work came out of that time because I wanted to write away from the job that I was in.
Mm.
I recognized that but the job was actually, weirdly, when I look back on it, the thing that actually was a motivational factor towards some of my best work, because I was being pushed by this belief that like, I've got to do better and I can get out of what I'm doing, even though the job itself really wasn't that bad at all. And the more that so now, like, I wrote my way into the place where I thought I wanted to be, which is to get up every morning and go to work, right? I see my son to school, and my wife and our daughter, she goes off to daycare, and my wife goes to work, and I have the, house. Now I do. And it's like, that was the dream. But actually, strangely enough, like, the writing gets harder when you're not like a part of the world, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? At least again, if I'm looking at like my makeup, who I am personally, and probably my talent level, like, I think I need to have more. So I'm really running into lately this notion of like, I probably do need to be more immersed in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, I'm very fortunate that I don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't even say have to do that. Like, having a job and writing is awesome. To be honest, like,
Mm-hmm.
when I had a job and I was writing, I was probably doing some of the best writing of my life. So there is a point of like, maybe I should get a job. I don't need one for the financial level, but I think I need one because when you put that much pressure on the writing bone,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't break, but it bends. And sort of the work that you're starting to put out after that is not the best work, right? So I don't work versus hustle. I'm not aware of, but I've certainly always been a hustler. And I think at some point, rest versus hustle, I think at some level, like, you get what you thought was your dream, and it still is your dream, because, okay, maybe that's what they always say. Like, you make a living by your pen, and you can just, make your own hours and do what you want. And that was great. And it is great. And I'm not negging it or anything, but at the same point, I'm not sure that I'm doing my best work under these conditions, to be honest.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I think a lot of just from I have twin daughters, and when I had them, I stopped working, and I was a workaholic before I had them. And I think a lot of stuff like that is being inspired by your environment, and when you are just forcing yourself to work and you're not getting anything fresh,
Mm-hmm.
I think it can make things a little bit stagnant. Mm-hmm. And needing
working in a vacuum, right? I mean, there's no stimuli, there's no material basically coming in. It's
material, inspiration.
I write full time as well, and it's the same thing. I don't need a job, but I've thought about getting one just to get out of the house. I mean, it was like even volunteering, where it's not even just to work, but doing something, even just something helpful to someone or for a group in town, is something that I've been looking into before, and then the pandemic happened. But it's something where it was really just trying to not just contribute, but also just get out of the house and socialize. So that's not just seeing my parents or seeing my wife's family, which is great, but just trying to bring in some more stimuli, because otherwise I'm in my office in the basement working all the time. It's great. I mean, this is what I've been working towards. And there's a certain level of, like you said, like what Craig said, you've got your dream and it's still your dream, but I don't even know if it's the work is harder or if it's just taken on maybe a bit of a vanilla flavor, because you don't have the stimuli. Again, I don't know about the hustle thing. Again, it's these things that sort of go on social media. I'm not always aware of them. For me, like the no-brainer is write at your own pace. I don't understand why it's even an argument. Do what you want to do what feels right. I mean, for me, it's just like, why get in arguments with anyone, much less strangers online, about anything, frankly. But I mean, for something like that, I always say, trust your instincts, like you do what feels good for you. It's like any kind of advice. But if we're talking about writing, it's like writing advice. Craig and I have had hours of conversations about this, and we're in sync on a lot of things. And I'm sure there's other things that we're different about, but it all boils down to following your instincts, what feels good, not going against the grain of your talent and your work method. And it takes a long time. They say that it takes all these years to get your voice. I think it takes just that period of time. You're also figuring out how you work. Should you work every day? Sure, if you want to work every day. This idea that like Joe Lansdale, one of my favorite writers, and he's a phenomenal writer, and he gives also the best advice. He's a person where I've met him once or twice at a convention, and he's just a really down-to-earth kind of a guy. He's just like a meat and potatoes writer. He just gets up, he writes, and every piece of advice he gives, it's always comes with, this is just what works for me. Like he's not preaching it. If it works for you, that's great. If not, do something else. So when I'm working on a project, the novel that I finished last year, I started it in July and I finished it in December, and I wrote every day, because when I'm working on a novel, I almost always work every day. And even if I'm only writing 200 words or even 100 words, that's just for momentum for me. The more I stay away from the story, the more everything starts to get distinct, and I start forgetting things, the characters, I start to lose them. So I'm really just staying with it for the momentum. But there's people who take years to finish their books, and that's fine too. You have to do what feels right to you. And it feels like that should be so obvious. I'm always surprised when people get into these arguments about other people telling you what to do, because every writer does it differently. You look at any success story about how people achieved or published their first book, or even if they got rich, if that's how you want to define success, and they're all different. Like whether it's Stephen King or Thomas Harris or J.K. Rowling, all these people, their stories are all different. The only thing that's really in common is they did something they really, really wanted to do, and they tried really, really hard. Like that's really the only thing that's really in common with them. Stephen King is prolific. I don't think anyone should compare themselves to Stephen King. I read an interview with Joe Hill once where he even said him and his brother don't compare themselves to their dad because they know that that's going to drive them nuts. Thomas Harris writes a novel like once every 10 years or so. And so what's he doing between all that time? Who knows? But
and who cares, really? It's his business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's doing what he wants to do, and he's doing really, really excellent work. For me, I think of myself as I like to hustle, but for me, it's really just, I've got a lot of ideas. I want to get them out of my brain before I go senile with old age. That's really why I hustle. I really like to write. I love to write. I've got all these ideas. I just want to get them down. So mine does not come from any place where I'm trying to certainly not shame anyone or show anyone up. I'm not even thinking of anybody else. It's your classic. I really only feel like I'm in competition with myself. It feels so silly to say that because it's such a line these days, but it's really true. I think it's the healthiest way to write. And it's the most satisfying because even though you say you're in competition with yourself, you're still not really in any kind of aggressive competition with yourself because I like myself. I want that guy to succeed. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Well, so then, go ahead, Kallie. No,
okay. So then, if you're talking about going back on your writing process and what works for you, are you guys more organic writers, where you get the idea and you have it and you can write it and you might not forget characters, or do you guys have like a wall with red strings and you're attaching things and you have a whole outline for it? I'm always very curious as to how books that I love started. Did they start as an idea that was in another book and then just, this didn't work for this, so I'll move it somewhere else?
Greg?
Yeah, I think organic is probably the best, Kallie, I would say, for me. There's usually, I don't know, like an image or a character who you want to follow, or, obviously most of us are trying to look for something that is you haven't seen before. Ultimately, though, you often come back to like something that is familiar, and then there is like within that something maybe you haven't seen before. Ideally, that the audience or the supposed reader hasn't seen before. But it used to be when I first started working, it was like just one idea that I would follow through to the finish. And I don't know about Ian, but I prefer that.
Mm-hmm.
But probably the last 5-6 years, you get opportunities that come in of like, would you like to do this? For example, would you like to try and write this pilot? And you're like, I've found that that siren song is very difficult to ignore, and only in retrospect you look back and you say, you know what? If you could have just coached yourself to like stay, committed to sort of the project that you were working on instead of allowing because I know, I have screenwriter buddies who, they'll work on 3 or 4 projects at the same time, and that's perfectly there. They have that really loose ability to sort of like jump from project to project and kind of put themselves in that realm of those characters and those plots and follow that through. And then, okay, well, I got to go over here. And I really admire that. And I think that's something that professionally is really important for them, because often they have like, say, 5 or 6 projects that they're juggling at the same time. But for me, it's like, it's like turning an ocean liner around. Like it's pointed in one direction and I really am cruising that way. Mm-hmm. And then you got to try and turn around and kind of work on this other project and then try and turn back to the project that you derailed yourself from. It's not like you were derailed from it. And then I guess, for those of us who have kids, we understand that the day-to-day exigencies of what happens when you have a child, like there's reasons why you get pulled away for, your kid gets sick. Sometimes that's 2-3 days a week that you're kind of pulled into that. So like that's probably been the most interesting thing lately is like, and I'm trying to coach myself. I think to go back to the prior conversation is like, I feel like I could probably kick out a very average book every year, or I could like take my time and write like the rest of my career, maybe 2 or 3 really books that really do the thing that I want to do. Maybe they don't end up being popular, but like I think I'm at that point in my career now where I really want to, the last whatever books that I write going forward, they carry through maybe trying to get back to that original notion, which is very difficult to find. And I'm sure Ian would say this and other writers you talk to. It's like trying to get back to the original reason why you were writing in the first place. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Go back to that high school student who became like enamored with this notion of becoming a writer and like try to remember really what was pushing you. Because I think sometimes lately I feel like there's other things that are pushing me that aren't really pure and that certainly weren't the things that were pushing me when I was younger. And, can you go back and find that person and the things that motivated him? Pretty difficult because I'm a different person now. I have a different life. I have different responsibilities and different needs. But if I could, to go back and find sort of those really alchemical, essential things that drove me to want to be a writer in the first place and harness those for a couple books, I think that would be way more valuable to me than just like sort of. So I guess, to be honest, the hustle versus rest. Yeah, rest. Mm-hmm. For me right now, rest, take my foot off the gas pedal a little bit and try and find a way to write the books that are meaningful to me, rather than maybe sometimes the books that I think people that they want me to write. I don't know if you have that ever, Ian. I hope you don't, but like, there's this weird feeling of like you're trying to please all comers.
Yeah.
And it's such a difficult and impossible. Yeah, right. It's just like you're not gonna do that, and yet there's some part maybe of your people pleasing underlying personality that, well, why can't I? It's like, well, because you can't, man. It's just not something that you're going to be able to do. So yeah, anyways, a belabored answer to a question you didn't even ask. Kallie.
No, I mean, I thought it was really interesting how you were talking about like the evolution of why you write and going back to your roots, because I feel like with this book, Cascade, which hopefully the U.S. market will get soon, but in terms of this short story collection, Rust and Bones, I think the two of them side by side, if somebody were to like entry level pick these up and get an introduction, like this one feels like where you're at right now with like, if there's a lot of stories about parenthood and, thinking through those kind of emotions and those kind of anxieties. Whereas this one has, maybe like a younger man feel. And so it comes out in your writing, in your Craig Davidson life. But I think a lot of people, I know me and especially, like, are we going to get a Nick Cutter book? And then how do you like separate the two and give them each like their own, you know, like, am I going to do a Nick Cutter book this year? Or am I going to do a Craig? Or is it just like whoever you feed the most, or do they fight?
I think that's what I was saying before. It's like, you know, Nick Cutter, in terms of like keeping the lights on around here, obviously my wife has an awesome job. So like, but in terms of my contribution, you know, Nick Cutter, you know, outpaces me, you know, in terms of like people, you know, what people read. But at the same point, like the Nick Cutter books that really worked, they really just did come out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like the idea came out of nowhere in a good way. And it's, when you start looking for something that kind of was organic, you know, that sort of just came out of nowhere, that's a kind of a dangerous thing, you know? So I think for me specifically, like, yeah, I'll take whatever story really feels is pushing at me to be written, you know, and it feels like it's the right time to write it, sort of a thing. So whether that's a Nick Cutter one, a Craig Davidson one, or it's something different entirely, you know, I don't know about you, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much the way with you. I'm organic. I just I try and do one project at a time, just because I feel like I'm into photography. I draw. I do all these kinds of things, but I always knew that I really wanted to focus on one discipline, because if I don't, nothing gets done. I start all these things and then nothing's finished. So I still take pictures, but really it's just for Instagram these days, you know. So, and I draw, but like once every few years, it's usually something for a friend or for my wife or something. And writing is obviously where I've decided to apply all of my effort. And even then I have to focus on one story, or else nothing gets done. So the novel I wrote last year, it started in July as like a novelette. I was just chipping away at something, because like a lot of people during the pandemic, I was just sort of felt like I was in limbo. Didn't even know if I really wanted to start anything. So it was a story that was bouncing around in my head for a while. So I started it, and it just got longer and longer, and I wasn't really doing anything else. I write full time anyway. So it just kept going and going, and the summer ended, it went into the fall, and I finished it in December, and suddenly it was 80,000 words. And that was great. You know, like, it's just the story went to where it needed to go. I had the time to do it and to really execute in a way that felt really really genuine. It was just, I wasn't restricting it, but I didn't really feel like it was really running on. It was just your classic case of the story was as long as it needed to be. Whether or not it's any good, other people will have to decide, but it's very different from what I've written. My wife likes it, which of course is a totally biased opinion, but she's also not afraid to tell me when my work is like, this needs work, this isn't that good. She's a very strict first reader, so she just liked the fact that it was different. It's a very, very different story for me, and I like that too. I liked that I can that I was willing to go to some different places, because it's sort of like you're growing as a writer and you're exploring other things that you want to write about. I'm not so much I mean, even though I feel like I'm an organic writer, I'm not much of a pantser. I do outline to a certain degree. My outlines are never written in stone. Anything can change. Things change all the time. But for me, it's just, if I don't write something down, I'm going to forget. So it sounds very romantic to say, oh, I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants and I'm not going to outline or write down anything. It's like, I can't do that. It's like, if I think of a good character or a good line of dialogue, if I don't write it down, I will forget by the time that comes. So it's, I admire people that don't outline at all and they were just going to remember everything, I guess. I think that's really cool, but that's not me. But again, that's, you know, you have to work the way that you want to work. It's funny that you talked about a pilot, because I was also asked to write a pilot recently. It was the same thing. I had a pitch. They really liked the pitch. And they said, we'd like for this to flesh it out. And I had no idea beyond the pitch. I was like, now I have to actually write this thing. And it was just like a week ago. I woke up and it was sort of like a found thing. It was suddenly, it was all there. I had the characters, I had the pilot, I knew how it was going to end. And I spent the morning writing it. I took my notepad to the grocery store. I was doing grocery shopping with my wife, and I still had it there because it was just pouring out of my brain. And if I didn't write it down, I was going to forget it. And that was like a week ago, and I just let it sit and stew because I was done. It's all there. I'll write it eventually, and it'll probably come very, very fast. But I knew that if I didn't write it down, I'd forget it. I might remember pieces of it later on, but there would always be that part of me that felt, oh, there was more there. And if you just written it down, Ian, you've got notepads everywhere. That could have been the one thing that really could have been really gold. So for me, it's a bit of the fear that if I don't write something down, I'll forget it. So yeah, it's notepads everywhere. But when it comes to working on a project, the focus is very organic. I try to stick to one thing and just let it go where it needs to go. Like no outline is written in stone. You really just have to follow your instincts, as I've said before.
So, Ian, while you were talking, the chat was kind of blowing up saying that people were buying shards. One person said they were buying it and then everybody else is buying it. So,
Awesome.
I mean, is that like your most current work? I mean, because we're getting close to, our time here. So I just want to make sure that like your fan base knows what to buy as like the freshest. Like, let's do it this way. Let's say like, what do you think is like a good entry level introduction to your work that would be like your strongest voice? And then what is your newest thing? And then what is coming out for both of you? And then we'll just wrap it up.
Yeah, I'd say Shards is the most recent. It came out from Tor.com.
And it's really scary.
Yeah, and I'm really happy with it. It's one of these things where it's sort of like the Mr. Burns comment. It's like, I know what I hate, and I don't hate this. And this is the closest I get to liking my own stuff because I'm very critical of my own work. I don't like to look at it once it's been in print. But Shards has had a really, really great feedback. People really seem to dig it, which is great because I had a lot of fun writing it and working on it with Ellen Dotlow. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of that story. And obviously, I'm really proud that people seem to be getting out of it what I was trying to put into it. Yeah, Every House is Haunted is out of print right now. So unless you can find it on the used market, there's stuff happening behind the scenes. I'm hoping that there'll be some announcements in the very near future. Unfortunately, I have to sort of be very mysterious about that. I don't like vague booking or anything, but it's just there's on the cusp of things. Totally random. I'm the central figure in this big CBC documentary that's airing on Friday about my days as a teenage UFO investigator. It's not really writing related, but it's pretty much how I got into writing. My failed career as a UFO investigator, my one big case.
That sounds awesome.
And it definitely was a very formative moment in my life. And the CBC asked me to write an essay about it. So that's on the CBC website. I'm supposed to be getting some information about how people outside of Canada can see it, whether it's through their YouTube channel or an app. I'm supposed to have that information soon, but I've seen it. My wife and I got to see an advanced screener of it a couple of weeks ago, and it's really, really well done. I'm a little shocked by how much I'm in it. I didn't realize I was going to be so prevalent. It makes me a little nervous because it was just not really expected. Like when you film things, you figure with editing, you're going to be in it for 5 minutes. And I'm in it quite a bit more than 5 minutes, I guess is all I'll really say about that. But they did a really, really great job. They were fantastic people to work with. So I'm proud of that too. It does sort of circle back to the writing, and it's happening right now while all this other stuff is going on. So the stuff that I can't quite talk about yet, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a really cool time. So hopefully, I'm sorry that I can't say that this book will be back in print or this book is coming out. My agent is shopping a novel right now. We are working on getting the reprint of Every House is Haunted back out there. There is some other movie stuff going on, so stay tuned.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so everybody needs to follow Ian on social media. He's on Instagram. You're One More Shadow on Instagram, and
I'm Super Noirtual on Instagram.
Super Noirtual, yeah, okay, on Instagram, and One More Shadow on Twitter. And then, Craig, do you want us to talk about like what would you recommend to somebody as your best introduction to your storytelling voice? What do you have out right now currently that people can buy, and what is coming?
What would I say? I would say like of the Cutter stuff, I've always been partial to Little Heaven. That's always kind of been the one that I like, I mean, it's like always, I'm sure Ian says the same. It's like asking to rank your children to it, but it's not really. It's not really as, I can very easily say which books of mine I like the most, and I couldn't actually say I love my children.
I vote this one.
Oh, the Shining Rose Club. That's a good choice too. That's
Ooh, we had both covers. Do it again, Kallie. Woo! Canadian and American.
Sure. Maybe that's actually a good choice. Like a fusion between what I write under my own name and Nick Cutter to a degree. That's probably the closest I've ever come to sort of helixing them into one another. Cascade will come out in the States this year. So that'll be the next thing to come out. And that's that. I don't really, to be honest, I think maybe the last question is what I'm working on. I'm really not working on much, to be honest. It's honestly been lovely when you suggested Sadie that we chat, and I haven't had a chance to see Ian since before the pandemic. So it's great, but at the same point, like, yeah, the pandemic and we had a baby. So
yeah,
to be honest, there have been other things that really, for the longest time in my life, my adult life, writing has been, other than my family, top of the list of what matters to me. And I think with many of us, you recognizing that like that kind of is put very much in a corner with all of this. And it's not really that the intensity is not there. It's not really that the focus or interest is not there. It's somewhat that the time is not there. And just that you feel destabilized quite often, really, not to make a big point of it. And if you guys aren't feeling that, then I'm just out on an island here. But
no, we totally do. I'm like shaking my head. Like,
in terms of getting any new writing done, I poke away at it, sort of a thing. But it's kind of for the first time in my adult life, it's kind of not as important as it has been. And I imagine that feeling will come back where it is, and hopefully it'll come roaring back at some point. But until that happens, I'm trying to find my joy in other places, to be quite honest. And it's been tricky because weirdly you realize that when you put so much weight on something, good weight that really it can bear, and that it feels comfortable putting that weight on it, and then you just don't stand on it for a while. I'm sort of wondering if I'm going to be like a coma patient who wakes up but then topples out of bed because all the muscles have gone soft. So anyway, that's something to worry about at another time. Right now, it's just sort of like enjoying the things that can be enjoyed and not worrying about the rest of it. But I really do appreciate you taking the time to, talk with other human beings. This is nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's great. Thank you very much for having us. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about right now. I think, Craig, like what you were saying is like, we just all, I mean, I vegged out in front of the news. My husband and he would come home from his job and we would just veg out in front of the news just to see like what is going on in the world, what is happening, and there was just hard to focus on anything else. It was hard to read. It was hard to do anything because our brains were occupied. But I do feel like there's some hope and some light at the end of the tunnel, and people are getting vaccinated, and things are happening. And
weather's coming back. It's a big difference when you can even just get outside of the house. I went for a run today, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Craig, where you've got good weather in Toronto. You're only an hour away from me, but it's like you're crawling out of a bunker. And I can say it from actually being in a bunker right now in my office. It is a total sea change with your emotions. I just came outside, and it's like I've seen the sun, when I would go to get the mail, but being outside walking in a fresh breeze, that's not the winter, the winter Holocaust. It's so different, and you can't believe that would make such a difference to how you feel, but it does. It's such a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's a massive difference. Sorry. No, it's like we just moved. My husband, in the middle of the pandemic, his job wanted him to open a new office in Las Vegas. So we just moved from Northeast Ohio to Las Vegas, Nevada. And I flew out of Ohio in a blizzard, and I flew into 65 degrees sunny weather in the desert. And it's you're spot on. Like, it's just eye-opening, and it is such a nice, refreshing thing to be able to just see the sun again, because we didn't have a lot of sunny days there in Northeast Ohio for a while.
Yeah, now you're in my time zone, so welcome to it. Yeah, no, it's really great, and it's good to see you guys. And I think marketing this way on Zoom, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, because I think, this is like a free way for authors to connect to their audience. And, we've discovered that you don't have to fly to the nearest bookstore and in the US or whatever to promote your books and do signings and stuff. So I just think it's like a revolutionary way that we've decided, we've been resourceful and having these author chats and building those connections and stuff however we can while things were just, shut down.
Yeah,
so we
had a chance to talk to Sadie, but just over the years, I'm sure Ian would say the same. You've been very supportive, not just of me, but of lots of writers and in the horror genre, and it's really meaningful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I thank you, my family thanks you, and that goes out to anybody who's ever given any had any support, because writers often we feel like we're in a bit of we're in a bunker. You know what I mean? So it is meaningful, especially I want to make sure you knew, for me and my family, really appreciate the support over the years, Sadie, for real. So I appreciate it. And I know we've never met, but when we do, when this is over, whatever, at a convention or something, we'll have
you can box with him. Everyone he meets,
No.
boxing match.
I won't even put my hands on my back. I won't even box for real. You'll probably still beat me up.
Yeah. I am 6 feet tall, so.
Yeah,
I'm the same way though, Sadie. It's true. Craig and I were talking about this just a few weeks ago on email, just talking about like book bloggers, especially you and all of the Nightworms people. It's a really valuable service. It's the love for books in general really comes across. You can't thank you enough. I remember when you were just starting out with this thing. It's a big deal. We were talking earlier about discipline, and it's the same thing for your work. I mean, think about how you started, and now think about where you are now with Nightworms. And there you go. It's not just a labor of love. I mean, it is, but I mean, the two operative words there are labor and love. It's love. Love is not that it's easy, but without the labor behind it, without the work, it's you would not have the empire that you have right now. So
the empire, yes, my world domination. No, we just want to say thank you. I mean, readers, we would be nothing without you guys churning out books for us. I mean, honestly, the fandom just comes because you guys give us so much. So just to give back to you guys in these ways of supporting you and making sure that your books get in the right readers' hands is like, it's a way that we say thank you. So thank you so much for coming to the chat, and I'm sure that like the fans are still like, talking about, here, we'll just pop up a few here. So this was great. And I just want to say thank you. And we'll do this again real soon. And we're rooting for you. And we're like, get in the writing cave and give us your books. We're ready. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Okay.